This is the Forbes Books Podcast, conversations with amazing humans who are impacting the world of business and beyond. Well, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this week, we're diving into the intersection of technology and relationships with Richard Walker. As the CEO of York Solutions, Richard understands the power of relationships. Through his work, he has witnessed how building meaningful connections with others can transform careers, companies, and communities. That's why Richard has dedicated himself to spreading the message of what he calls relationship equity, the principle that when you invest in the relationships in your life, you reap exponential rewards. We're going to talk about his journey from a tiny town in England to running one of the most prominent IT consulting firms in the world, the importance of self-awareness, and what inspired him to write the new book, Relationship Equity. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Joe. It's good to see you.
Good to see you again, sir. And I want to start by talking about kindness, because I feel like as horrible as the pandemic was, it kind of reminded us that, hey, we should be a little nicer to each other. And I know this is sort of the hill you're dying on in terms of the importance of kindness. But when did you realize the impact of kindness in the workplace?
Very early on in my career, in the workplace. My favorite job of all time was a dishwasher. And the reason why, I was 14 at the time, I was actually a dishwasher at two different places. And there was this lady that took care of me. And I don't know why she did, but she really went out of her way to take care of me more emotionally than anything, make sure I was all right. Or she was just very kind. And I wish I could go back to her now and tell her I really appreciate how kind she was to me. I was very fortunate to have grown up in a place where kindness was kind of common between people, a very small town, and everybody knew each other. But I've carried that, I think, throughout my career, always thinking about other people first and what's driving them and what challenges they have any day of the year and any minute of the day. Because it's not difficult to be kind. It really isn't. And sometimes just a simple smile can go a long way with people. Open a door for somebody, let them through. Simple things. People think of kindness as this huge thing. It doesn't have to be. It can be something very simple. So it's something I think that I grew up with, the culture I grew up in, the family I grew up in. I was taught that being kind is something that we should all be every single day.
And then how did you realize that, oh, wait, I guess not everyone else had the same mentor I did when I was washing dishes? There's a lot of, for lack of a word, dicks out there, Richard. When did you realize it during your work journey as you're rising the ranks and becoming the successful leader? Like, when did you realize, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why is not everyone just nice to everybody?
I've not done a survey on this, and I'm not sure there's ever one being done. But you'll be interested to know, for every kind person, how many unkind people are there? I don't know what that ratio is. I really have no idea. But probably too many. And, people fall into two categories, either kind or not kind. But there are those people, we all have bad days, and we can all be unkind on a given day, depending on what we've got going on. I think most people have got kindness in them. Some people have got more than others. But for the ones that are more on the, what I would call, narcissistic side, those are the ones to be very careful of, because they can appear to be kind when really they're not. They're very self-motivated and very clever. So human dynamics is very, very complicated in our social lives, in our personal lives, in our work lives. But truly understanding what makes people tick and how to try and get them to be kind when maybe they're not being kind, that's the challenge. Because I think with some people, it's down to self-awareness. If they realize that they're not being kind, but they have it's a personal choice. It's an intentional choice to be either kind or not. And to help people understand that they're in control of that. And if we can all help, there's times in the day I'm unkind. We all are. But I don't like it. When that happens, if I'm unkind, then I don't like that about myself. And going back and apologizing if you say some unkind words to somebody is very, very important. But it's, I think there's kindness in everybody. I really do. But the ones that are unkind on a regular basis, those are the kind of people I tend to try and stay away from.
That's great. And, it's funny, you mentioned self-awareness. I'm a big proponent of it, and I try to be as self-aware as possible. But we're also live in this world, Richard, where we carry business as a shield. Like it's we're busy, so that means we can be curt. we can be rude because we're busy. I got to get this job done by 5 o'clock. Get out of my way kind of thing. How do we remedy that? Because at the end of the day, as a businessman, you got to get the job. You want your team to get the things done, but you want them done in the right way. So what is it with this, from pandemic to epidemic, this epidemic of busyness where it doesn't matter how we treat our surroundings as long as we get the job done?
So to me, it's all about priorities and prioritizing. I'll give you an example. Tomorrow, I had a lunch meeting scheduled with a very important client of mine who I've known for a long time, and I cancelled on him. And I won't tell you the text he sent me back. It was tongue-in-cheek, but he called me some not nice words. He said, "Who did you drop me for?" I said, "For somebody far..." And seriously, Joe, I said, "For somebody far more important than you." That's what I told him. I said, "It's my 97-year-old buddy who asked me if I'd go to lunch with him and his wife tomorrow. And frankly, he's more important than you are right now." You know what he said? "I couldn't agree more with you." So yeah, the analogy, I love this analogy. I read it years and years ago. It's the rocks in the jar. I can't remember who it was. Some Harvard professor, you know that analogy.
I'm not sure. Go ahead. Give it to me.
Brilliant. If you don't know it, I'll jog your memory if you recall. So the Harvard professor on the stage, a lot of people in the audience, he fills this jar full of big rocks and asks the audience, "Please raise your hand if you think this is full." Well, most of the audience raised their hands. And so he went back behind the curtains, he came out, and he brought out some pebbles, poured them in the big jar, and filled in the little holes in between the big rocks. And now raise your hand if you think it's full. Well, half the audience raised their hand. So then he goes back behind the curtain, brings out this big bag of sand, pours it in the holes and the gaps between the big rocks and the small rocks, and now the sand's in there. Now raise your hand if you think it's full. Vast majority don't raise their hand. Then he goes out and gets a bucket of water, fills it to the top. Raise your hand if you now think it's full. Everybody raises their hand. And then he says, "What's the moral of the story?" And somebody raised their hand and said, "There's always room to get more in." And he said, you missed the point. The point is, if you don't get the big rocks in first, you can't get them in at all afterwards. So really, it was a brilliant analogy on perspective. Deal with the things that are important to you. For me, tomorrow, the big rock for me is going to meet with my 97-year-old buddy. He's more important to me right now than my client. And I told him that. And he got it, and he understood. Because I wouldn't have time in the day to go and meet with my buddy if I didn't do that. So every single day, to answer your question, it's important to prioritize what's important to you in your life, business and personal. That way, if you, and I'm not a very well-organized person, so I don't want to come across as somebody that's well-organized. I've got it all, my shit together. I don't at all. But I do often ask myself, is what I'm doing right now important? Should I be doing something else? Because to your point, I think a lot of us hide behind, "I'm very busy. I've got this work to do, and I can't meet with you because I'm very busy." Well, it's more often than not, it's bullshit. It just isn't. It's a reason. It's a blow-off because for some reason you don't deem that thing you've been asked to do to be important at that time in your life. I mean, I don't know if that was it was a long, weird answer to your question, Joe, but that's kind of my perspective.
No, I love that. That's great. And you come from the IT industry, and as an outsider to the IT industry, to me, I've always felt as a very transactional world. It's like, you pay us for this product and service, we will provide you. If it works, let us know. If it doesn't, and that's it. But it seems like reading up on you, finding out more about you, reading up on your book, Relationship Equity, it's more personal than people, or maybe just me, but I would think it's more personal than people think it is.
Well, if you read on the back of my book, it says, yes, I own an IT consulting firm, but I'm about as technical as a pint of Guinness. I actually said that, which is true. So the success of any business today is technology is a huge part of it, but it's also about people and process. It's a combination of technology, people, and process. They've got to work in tandem together, and it starts with people. We all know our greatest asset in any company are the people that you have. And for companies that have very high attrition, it's very difficult for them to have any kind of momentum because people have tribal knowledge. And if that leaves and it keeps going, you've got to retrain people. It's very, very difficult to do. I'm very proud of the fact we have very low attrition at York. We've got people that have been with the company for 20, 25 years, literally. So it's really people that drive technology. Technology itself is, there's a multitude of options for any given business problem that somebody's looking to solve. And they're all good. Some are just, more appropriate for some companies than others. But often the reason why companies choose a given technology or a given solution isn't just because of the solution itself. It's because of the trust they have in their partner that they're working with to help solve business problems through the use of technology. So trust and relationship equity is of paramount importance in our business. I would argue also within corporations, because there's a tremendous amount of influence going on at any given day in an organization at every level, especially at the higher levels in organization. It's business is predicated on the same thing: trust and relationships. Do you truly have what's best in the best interest of the people that you're working with, or are you just self-serving? People find out if you're just self-serving. Ultimately, if you can't help a company solve a business problem through the use of technology, you got to move on and let somebody else do it. I'm a big believer in transparency and letting people know that, sorry, can't help. I've said that many times. What you're looking to solve is not our area of expertise. But I do know a couple of other companies I'll recommend you to. I've done that many times. Knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at. Early in my career, I would try and do everything. It always backfires. If you got to stick to your own knitting. Now, sometimes you can create some new patterns within your knitting, but you're getting too broad and trying to do everything never works. And I've learned that over the long haul. We tried doing offshore stuff, failed miserably. We tried doing managed service stuff, failed miserably. But what we do now is as good as it gets from what we do. We've really focused and honed the services that we have, and I believe that they're the best of their kind because we're always looking to innovate what we do and not spread too far. So we've really honed in on our niche, which has been very well received.
That's great. How about some advice for leaders out there? Because you do have this sales background where you've run sales divisions, and as you know, with sales, it was that attitude that you had. From Glenn Ross, always be closing. Who cares what the cost is at the end of the day? I've got to hit my quarterly budgets. I've got to hit my annuals. But then you become the CEO, and then you have to thread that needle of the always be closing mentality to a certain extent, but also being able to deliver on what was closed. Did you have to grapple with that when you were elevated to CEO to be able to separate those two? Or is there no separation of the two? Do they just kind of run side by side on like a highway?
They run side by side. In my mind, they do, because, always be closing. And I love that analogy, by the way, the steak knives. I always wanted the steak knives. The Cadillac, somebody else is going to win. He just didn't want to get fired. The third prize you fired. That's a brilliant analogy. But to me, people that sales, people think of sales. People have a different perception of what sales is. Sales is solving a problem of any kind. If there's a problem there to be solved and you have a potential solution, then the person that's looking to have a problem solved, you need to help determine between yourselves, do you have the solution that's going to solve their problem? And if you do, wonderful. If you don't, agree that you don't and move on. So sales is about problem solving. It's not about, selling snow to Eskimos. It's not that. People kind of get off, I'm so good at sales, I can sell snow to Eskimos. Well, that's rubbish if they need, unless they want some more snow. If they want more snow, wonderful. If they don't sell it to them. But to me, I wrote about this in my book as well. Some people say I keep business and my personal life very separate, and I understand that. But I don't believe that at all, because some of my best friends now have been born through business relationships where I've helped to solve business problems. And if you genuinely like people, and if you're genuine, now not every single client of mine I'm best friends with, not at all. With some clients it is more transactional. We provide a great service and they appreciate that service. But human connections are very complicated. Human dynamics are very complicated. And there are those people you hit it off very, very quickly with that you can become lifelong friends with. There's some that it takes more time because you've got to build trust with them. And it's understanding if you're not pushing things too quickly. Early in my career, I would try and push things too quickly, and it often backfired. Now, I'm at an age where I'm a bit wiser than I used to be when I was 22 years old, but you got to let things develop at their own pace and don't push things. And again, it really comes down to understanding what problems that they're looking to solve. And sometimes they're big, airy problems, and sometimes they're little problems that you can solve. And it's understanding, and that all comes with asking the right questions. You got to ask the right questions at the right time in the right way. That's something that I talk about in my book as well. It's about asking the right questions of the right people in the right time in the right way. Now that sounds simple on the surface, but it's really not. The words we use are very important. When we use them are very important. Who we use them with are very important. And how. You can have the same sentence with exactly the same words in it. How we structure sentences, which is why the written word can be very dangerous. Email communication can be very dangerous because depending on our mindset at any given time of the day, we can interpret the sentence very, very differently. That was completely opposite to how it was intended by the writer. That's why this English language thing that we've got is very complicated and fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's funny that you draw the parallels to the business and personal. And I remember last year I did a podcast with a former chief customer officer at Twitter before the bloodletting that Elon Musk let out of there. Her name was Sarah Personal, and she had this sentence that really rang true with me because it's always, but it flies in the face of what many people have been saying for years. And she said she hates the term, it's not personal, it's business. And to her, she said, there's nothing in the planet more personal than business.
100% agree with that.
And I think a lot of people don't get that. What you were talking about, they try to separate. This is my 9 to 5 life. This is my life from 5 to 10 at night, and then I go to bed. Let's talk about this idea of like, there's nothing more personal than business because everything we do, our life depends on it. Whether we all want to say we want to separate ourselves from that, man, what we do on our 9 to 5 sure has a big impact on what it has on our families, our lives, our future, our grandchildren, everyone in the future, all depend on what's going on in that world of business.
You know, I couldn't agree more with that. However, here's the alternative, and this it does sadden me to say this. My father worked in the same factory for over 40 years. He is the wisest man that I know. He worked 12 hours a day to support his family, and he didn't talk about work at all when he came home. It's very separate to him. He had a job, which is different. But to your point, though, being in people with careers, people in business, it's a huge part of their life. It's arguably, next to their family, the most important thing to them is their career. So yes, it's personal. It's very personal. And one of the things I would say to buyers, to people out there that are evaluating services and products and what have you, is be transparent with people. Don't waste their time deliberately. I mean, sometimes you've got to evaluate different services and different products to see which is best for you, and you should do that. But be transparent, because the people, if you were deliberately wasting their time, you were negatively impacting their lives. And the same goes on the other side. If you're selling a product or a service, be very transparent. Don't waste, everybody's time is valuable. Sometimes we've got to spend time, and ultimately you don't get the end goal that you want, and that's okay. But what I'm urging people to do is not to deliberately go out of your way to waste somebody's time, because that's time they could be spending doing something else that's more valuable to them, like playing golf or going fishing or selling another deal or wherever it is that you need to do that day. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And it's funny because, the one thing that you kind of alluded to earlier about, when you said messages digitally is nuance. And I think there is nuance to there's nothing more personal than business, because I don't expect people to have a day of work and then go home and bitch to their partner for the next 4 hours. But to me, it's the idea of personal and business all relies in the fact that it's you. Like we cannot separate ourselves. We are Correct. Who we are when we wake up, when we go to bed, regardless of what our job is. So if you're saying it's not personal, it's bullshit, because that means it's not you then. Have you cut yourself away from your body? Are you a different being because of that? And so that's always been my hill to die. That's been my hill, Richard, is the fact that, listen, we are whoever we are, and it doesn't change depending on if we're in office working a Zoom call or we're just hanging around with friends at a bar.
Yeah, however, and I agree with that, Joe, but let me tell you something that I learned in a management training years and years and years ago. although I 100% agree with what you said, there are times we all wear different hats in any given day. We wear a parent hat, we wear a friend hat, we wear, a work hat. And it's important to know which hat that we're wearing, because I believe for myself, I'm always myself, but maybe not 100% myself, because the conversation I have at the bar with my buddies, I couldn't have the same one in a work setting. So situational awareness is very important. Believe me, my mouth has got me in trouble more times than once over the course of my career.
I believe that.
Yeah, I bet you do. So my point is, authenticity is so important. Being who you are is so important. But also understand situational awareness, because it goes back to what I said about saying the right things at the right time to the right people in the right way. I can't tell you how many people that have come to me looking for my help to help them find their next role, and it wasn't anything to do with their technical ability. It was to do with them voicing their opinion at the wrong time, or to the wrong people in the wrong way. And it was lack of political awareness that they did that. And more often than not, they weren't wrong. But it was knowing, not realizing that, okay, I got to hold this information back a bit, because I got to share it at the right time in the right way. Because sometimes what people will do in the wrong setting with a number of people in there, they'll voice their strong opinion on something and not realize the damage that they're doing to somebody else that's in that room that actually might have been deemed to create that problem. So yes, I agree with you, but authenticity, so important. But situational awareness is also very important on top of that, and knowing which hat that you're wearing any given time in the day, because within, any given hour, we can wear different hats. I mean, I work virtually. I'm at home a lot, and I got to go out and take the rubbish out from time to time. That's when I got to play my husband hat, and then I might get a phone call, and I got to play the CEO, and I might get a call from a friend. So you got to switch gears quickly and know which hat you're wearing.
Yeah, no, and like you said, how we started the conversation, if you still come from that mindset of kindness and treating people nicely,
yes,
it doesn't matter what hat you're wearing.
Doesn't
right?
matter.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I mean, and it does get back to that in my mind of kindness, because it doesn't cost anything to be kind, nothing.
Yeah, and that leads us to the book, Relationship Equity. Why a book? I always like to add, this is always a tough question I ask authors. It's like, why a book? Like, you could do so many other things. I'm sure you'd prefer, Richard, spending more time, developing that 9-iron. I don't know. But why spend all this time to write a book and put your message out in paper form like that?
Well, it's funny you mentioned 9-iron. I'm pretty good with that one, but 4-iron.
Oh,
yeah. I might have to get rid of that damn thing and go to a hybrid. But why a book? And I've been asked that quite a bit. It's something that I've always wanted to do. Well, I shouldn't say always, but for quite a few years. And the biggest reason, the biggest driving force behind this initially was I come from, like I mentioned, a very small town. I'm actually half Italian. My mother's 100% Italian, grew up on the farm. I wrote about this in the book. And she left for England when she was in her early 20s, didn't even know the country spoke different languages. Mind-boggling. How she didn't turn and run when she got to Germany, I'll never know. But I never knew her grandparents. They died before I was born. I only knew my father's mother, who I was close to until she died when I was, 21, 22 years old. Didn't know his father. I come from farming. And some of the artifacts I have that my father's given me, it's gold to me. They're little booklets of buying sheep and buying cows and little things like that. And so I would love to be able to read about their lives, because to them, their lives are probably nothing special at all. Very special to me, because that's a big part of who I am. That's a big part of what, makes me a little bit crazy. So for me, the biggest reason for writing a book is when I'm gone, dead and buried, hopefully a lot of years to come, my kids, our 3 kids were all born here, soon to be 29, 26, and 22. They were very fortunate that they were, not that they would have been unfortunate, because they love to go back where I'm from, but they were fortunate to be born into the demographic they were born into. And I talk about the socio-economic period in my book. The driving force to start with behind this was for my grandkids to come to be able to understand why they're a little bit screwed in the head, Joe. It's because of this crazy Englishman. I can blame that guy. I would like them to be able to read a small part of who they are and understand my story, because I had so much help along the way and so many lessons learned along the way, which I wrote about in my book. But then it kind of morphed into, okay, how can I morph that into creating something that would be of interest to people that don't know me personally, lessons I've learned in business and lessons I've learned through humanity with people and what drives people and what people can do. So the ultimate goal is for as many people that read this, they look at themselves in the mirror and they go, maybe there's a couple of things I can tweak with the way I deal with people and my relationships that can be of mutual benefit. So those were the two driving forces behind writing this book. And what came out of it was incredible for me. And the biggest, benefit to me writing this book was my daughter, my youngest, because she's a writer and she's only 22 and she's just authored her own book, the whole thing from scratch herself. And it's truly incredible. She was my editor. I mean, ultimately, she edited every single word and she drove me crazy because she would not let me go fishing until we finished a chapter and went back over it again and again. So it came across because she is an incredible mind and she gave me some great feedback. So the time spent with her going through every word of the book again and again was incredible time that I'll cherish forever. And I know that she enjoyed it as well.
I love that. That's great. And I'm sure she got to give you more shit. She's like, hey, Dad, all that crap you gave me in high school? Here, let's do this now.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that. And the one chapter that she said to my wife, she said, there's a chapter in there that's going to be about relationship equity in marriage. And my wife said, yeah, let me write that one.
That's awesome. Now, let's talk about the title a second, because I think when you started writing this, the word equity wasn't as loaded as it is now. Unfortunately, it's been weaponized by some people, but we're not going to get into that. But talk to me about the title, relationship equity. What does that mean for someone who comes upon your book and is like, equity? Is that like, they're not sure what exactly that means, but how would you explain what relationship equity is?
Well, that was part of the reason for the title is to provoke that kind of thinking and questioning of what does equity mean because equity is actually bolded, relationships smaller. I firmly believe that the more equity that you can create in a relationship, think of it about putting coins in a bank. And if you keep depositing coins in a bank, but you're not actually asking to get a return on those coins, good things happen at some point. Those coins, they might be silver coins, most of them will turn to gold without you even asking. If you do enough of going back to being kind, it's not just a matter of kindness, it's actually going out of your way. And some of the returns that I've seen in business weren't back to the ABC. They weren't back to Glengarry Glen Ross. It wasn't always be closing. It was because I'd deposited enough coins in their bank that I was the first person they thought of when they needed, our services, IT consulting services. I got a phone call, and they didn't even say, hey, because you helped me, I'm going to help you now. That wasn't even inferred. It was because of the authenticity and the genuine desire to help somebody that it came back. Now, I liken it to kind of and I don't want to give the impression that every time you do that, your bronze coins are going to turn to silver and gold. They don't always. I liken it to that. What's that round bat game you've got in this country that's just not cricket? What's that round bat? Baseball. Yeah, that one. Yeah. If you think about it, Joe, the best batters in the world, they fail 70% of the time. 70%. But that 30% is where they make the millions. So it's kind of similar in that. And sometimes the 70% where you've actually deposited your coins in the bank, sometimes those coins will turn to silver and gold over time. It's not a quid pro quo. That's one of the biggest things I want to make very clear to people. It's not quid pro quo. Quid pro quo is, Joe, I will do this for you only if you do this for me in return. That's a subtle and significant difference. It's not that. So much of my time I spend right now doing what people might even consider free consulting, because I spend a lot of my time with executives, helping them with their careers, being a sounding board, offering advice. I don't charge a penny for that because I'm developing equity with them. And I've got so many case studies of where that's come back without me asking for it. So I'm a big believer in, if you operate from that standpoint, not just in business, but just in your personal life as well. I talked about the story of the island. after the hurricane that we live on North Capitol Island down in Florida through the winter months. And it was incredible how many of those coins turned to gold of people that we'd gone out of the way to help. We did without asking for anything in return. But then I give you my favorite little story. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I think I wrote about this in the book. In fact, I'm pretty sure that it did. There's only one house that not just one, but one big house that was fortunate. It had a full house generator, so it had shower and cooking and all the things we take for granted. And so a lot of us piled over there, and I'd forgotten my phone, so I went back to our house. Everything was out, water, electric. It was like luxury camping for a month or so. And I hear this noise behind our house. Now, at the time, our sewer system, we changed it altogether now, was above ground, and it went to everybody's on a sewer system there. What do you call those things in the ground? Everybody's got their personal one, a big tank. I can't remember the name of it.
Septic tank.
That's the one, thank you. Everybody has on their own septic. And ours was up out of the ground before it ran to the septic, and it was broken. And there was a noise behind the house. And what's going on? It could have been an animal. We got all kinds of critters there. And it was a fella that lives on the island. He does odd jobs and he helps people fix things and whatever. He was fixing our pipe. Nobody, at least I hadn't contacted him. My wife, I hadn't contacted him. But he'd heard on the grapevine we needed help. He showed up out of the blue. I got to know him before. I hadn't spent much time with him, was very kind to him and nice to him. It's not that I'd done a lot for him. I hadn't. Now, but think about this. And I just thought about this now, Joe. It's just really, really interesting. I know his son very well. Spent quite a lot of time with his son and been very kind to his son. So it just dawned on me now, maybe that could have been the reason. I had no idea. No idea. Because sometimes when you do good things, when you're kind to people, it spreads. It's not just that one person. And so if he wanted anything right now, and what was funny is I went back to the house and got a bottle of Jameson. We had a couple of drinks, and I helped him. I helped him fix the pipe, and we had a good time doing it. When I got back about an hour later, I was, where the hell did you go? I ran into Jason, and he was fixing the pipe, so I helped him with it. We had some fun with it, but I would bend over backwards to help that fella now. Now, would I have done before if he needed help? Yeah, I would have helped him, because I like to think I'll help anybody that's in need. But people like him go right to the very top of my list. Anything that he needs, I'm bending over backwards to help him. He's got equity with me. And there's so many people in my life that have got a ton of equity because they've gone out of the way to help me, whatever it was, without asking for anything in return. And I would, I'd jump on a plane, I'd be driving down to the house, I'd do whatever I need to do to help them because they've got equity with me.
That's awesome. That's great. And lastly, I've been doing this for a bit now, 3 years, interviewing entrepreneurs, CEOs, and reading up on entrepreneurship. I've noticed that subject matter experts don't always make the best CEOs. And inevitably they fail because they don't have the soft skills, they don't have the management skills, and the company goes under. You've been clear, you mentioned it here and on in your book, that you're not this mega tech expert, but you run a tech company. For someone listening today and be like, well, wait a minute, how could a guy who's not a tech expert run a tech company? How do you explain that in layman's terms to folks of how that works? Because I think most people see, especially because of business media and technologies in our face 24/7, that we make these CEOs stars overnight because they've created this widget, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're great bosses. How do you connect the two? The fact that you are not this tech genius, but you are a successful tech leader.
Well, not only am I not a technologist, in my mind, I'm still a bricklayer. Bricklayer, youth leader, physical education teacher, and got into this game by complete default. But I got into it because of the people side of the business. And I think, you made a point, and it's a very, very valid one. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with over the years that are very strong technologists that wanted to create their own business and thought just because they're a strong technologist, they could be a successful CEO. Well, it doesn't always work. More founders than not will fail because it's a combination of many factors that create a successful business. And it starts with the people, back to the very first thing that we talked about. And for me, the reason why there's always a lot of small reasons for why companies are successful that all kind of combine into one in a big jigsaw puzzle. But it all starts with the people. And the reason why we're so successful is we have a wonderful, wonderful team at York that all know what they're responsible for, what they're accountable for, and having it all meshed together, from a sales and marketing and HR and infrastructure. I mean, every component of the business has got to fit well together, and there's got to be a vision there, and everybody's got to understand and buy into the culture. I mean, culture is a huge part of any organization. But the key is, I'm not a technologist, but there are people at York that are absolutely off the charts, brilliant technologists. Why do they want to come and work for York when I'm not a technologist? Hell if I know. But I'm glad they do. But it's what's important as well to any founder and anybody that wants to start the company is for them to understand that they don't have to be the front-facing person. Yes, what's very important is people understand the difference between the title and the role. You take the CEO title, for example. There are some brilliant operational CEOs that are not out in front of the clients. They are not the visionary, but their partner is. And their partner might have a COO title. I mean, for a long time before I took over as a CEO, my title was, Joe? I was the CGO. You know what that stands for?
No.
Chief Golf Officer. I made it up because your title, by design, it was a generic. Now, when I took over as a CEO from Bill when he retired, people said, if you want to be taken seriously by people that don't know you, you got to become the CEO. And it kind of made me cringe a bit, but I did. But what's more important is understanding the role that you play and understanding what roles need to be played in any given business. And there's a very big difference between a startup mentality and a company of our size now. But having said that, I said this to somebody just a couple of days ago. One of the things I love about the company that I work for is we still have that startup mentality. We're a big company now, but we're still very scrappy in our minds, and we're always looking. I mean, our vision statement is simple: to be innovative, disruptive, and have impactful solutions. So those are three words, are very simple words, but everybody says they're innovative. Well, okay, what are you doing new? What are you trying to do new? What are you disrupting? How are you changing the status quo? And are you doing it for the sake of doing it? Are you really creating impactful solutions for your clients that moves their needle as well? Because if you're not doing that, don't be innovative and don't be disruptive if it doesn't create a better outcome for you and your clients. So I'm always looking at that. So as it gets back to your question, it's very important for people to understand, in order to be a successful business or in technology, you don't have to be a technologist. You just have to know where you want to go and the people that you need, what you're trying to create, and the people that you need in those right seats to get there. And ironically, a lot of the companies in technology that fail, it's because the founder is a strong technologist and they don't truly understand business principles with what it takes to grow a business. And ultimately, they might grow a little bit, but then they fold, because it's truly about understanding business principles, how they match up with technology principles.
That's awesome. He is Richard Walker, the former Chief Golf Officer turned Chief Executive Officer at York Solutions and the author of Relationship Equity, which is available now wherever books are sold. Richard, thanks again for the time.
You're very welcome, Joe. It's fun talking to you.
Ditto. And that'll do it for another episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Joe Pardavila or on TikTok at J Pardavila. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.